So we're calling it 49ers no days off because unlike Brandon Aiyuk and Trent Williams, I am not taking a day off. This is technically the 49ers day off of practice. The players can chill today, but I'm sure a lot of them are still working out because sometimes taking a day off when you're playing a professional sport can set you back. However, we won't be back out on the field in Santa Clara until tomorrow. I, though, have made a promise to you, the audience, the consumer of 49ers news, 49ers content, that we do not take days off. Not on the writing for The Athletic, not on the channel, not on the podcast. And the question today that we have to ask is, how long can the 49ers withstand the absences of Trent Williams and Brandon Aiyuk without negative downstream effects in the regular season? The reason that I bring this up is because in 2022 with Deebo Samuel and in 2023 with Nick Bosa, the 49ers ended up seeing adverse effects of those contract negotiations, which were prolonged on both players' play during the regular season. Both players even came out and acknowledged that much after the fact. In the case of Deebo Samuel, I think that's one that is also pertinent right now because it just so happens that 2 years ago on this very day, it was the Sunday in between the first block of practices and the second block of practices when pads came on. So 2 years ago on this very day is when news of the Deebo Samuel extension broke. So Deebo Samuel signed in time and ended his holdout or hold in or whatever he was doing in time to practice in pads with the 49ers on the Monday that's coming up tomorrow. That was 2 seasons ago. Obviously, the time that Deebo Samuel signed 2 seasons ago has come and it's passed here in 2024 without a new deal for Brandon Aiyuk and without a new deal for Trent Williams. So unless we get news a little bit later tonight, in which case I'll report on it, or early tomorrow morning, in which case I'll obviously report on it as well. Unless something like that happens for either Brandon Aiyuk or Trent Williams, we can assume that Aiyuk's hold-in will continue into the padded session of training camp and that Williams' holdout will continue into the padded session of training camp. Aiyuk has been in meetings. He's been doing the stuff off the field, so at least there's that. But as far as building a football callus goes, as far as building on-field rapport with Brock Purdy goes, he hadn't been doing that. And Trent Williams hasn't been at the facility at all. So he hadn't been in meetings and he hasn't been building his on-field callus. Go back to 2022. Deebo Samuel signed his contract at this time. He did obviously start working out of training camp and he did play in that 2022 season. But his production was down relative to 2021. And Deebo later said that just the drama of the whole contract over the course of the offseason did affect the way that he prepared over the course of the offseason. And he said that affected his play and his ability to stay healthy in the 2022 season. So you heard it from Deebo himself. Then there was Nick Bosa in 2023, last season. Bosa was still far, far from reporting at this point, still over a month away from reporting at this point. Bosa did not sign his contract until about 3 days before the start of the regular season. And he later acknowledged that his slower start for the 2024 season or 23 season came because he was not at training camp, that he was working out, that he was in really good shape based on what he was doing out at his compound in Florida. But there's something about actually getting on the football field and working with other NFL players that develops a callus in you and develops a type of conditioning in you that you can't just do in your home gym. So Nick Bosa said that he was playing catch up for at least a few weeks at the start of the regular season. And of course, that meant that the contract negotiations and the holdout did affect his play. So the question at hand is, how long can the 49ers withstand Trent Williams and Brandon Aiyuk being away from the facility and not practicing without it affecting how those two play, and by extension, how the 49ers play over the course of the regular season? So first, let's take a look at a quick timeline. We could take Deebo Samuel off the screen now. That was 2 years ago to this day, 2 years ago. But anyway, the preseason opener for the 49ers against the Tennessee Titans in Nashville is on August 10th. Today, it's July 28th. So that's coming up in less than 2 weeks. I'll explain why this date is important in just a second, but let's go through all the key dates so far. After that, on August 15th and 16th, the 49ers will hold joint practices against the Saints, and that's going to happen in Irvine down in Orange County. That's going to be ahead of their second preseason game on August 18th against the Saints at Levi Stadium. And then on September 9th, we will have the season opener. The 49ers are going to be playing the Jets on Monday Night Football. All right, so the preseason opener against Tennessee. Why is this important? Well, this is important because there is a financial inflection point when it comes to fines when the preseason does start. As of right now, Trent Williams is getting fined $50,000 per day. It's a mandatory fine. The 49ers are not allowed to forgive it. Brandon Aiyuk is not being fined because he is actually in the building. As a player on a rookie contract, he would be subject to fines of $40,000 per day that would be forgivable if the team so chooses, if you are not at the facility, but Brandon Aiyuk is there. Anyway, once you get to August 10th, that preseason opener, the first preseason game, if Brandon Aiyuk and Trent Williams do not play due to contractual reasons, the 49ers will have recourse to fine them. So, and the fine can be very big. It can be up to a game check. A game check is calculated by a player's base salary divided by 18 weeks. As it stands right now, Trent Williams' base salary is over $20 million. So divide 20 million by 18, that's over $1 million. The 49ers can fine Trent over $1 million, theoretically, if they want to, up to that amount if he misses the first preseason game. Brandon Aiyuk's salary is $14.1 million. So you divide that by 18, it comes out to, I think, around $800,000. They could fine Brandon Aiyuk up to $800,000 for not being available for that first preseason game. Will the 49ers do this? I don't know, but I'm just saying that they have that option at their disposal if their patience starts growing thin. That's where team leverage comes in. And there's a certain dollar amount at which Trent Williams does not want to start, incurring fines. He's okay, obviously, right now with the $50,000 per day. He thinks that whatever deal he could rework with the 49ers will make up for the trouble. But once we start talking numbers above $1 million per game, and that's what the number will be if this reaches the regular season for sure, because Trent Williams will just stop getting paychecks at that point, and his base salary is that $20 million. Well, then all of a sudden, the money can start doing a little bit more talking. So that's where the financial pressures potentially lie for the 49ers. But the question we want to answer is, how long do Trent Williams and Brandon Aiyuk need to practice with the team for the 49ers to be unaffected? And I think that's where this date comes in. I think the August 15th and 16th joint practices against the Saints seem to be, based on, conversations that I've had around the facility and just based on common sense. When you look at the calendar, the season opener following about 3 weeks after that, I think that you definitely would like these players in the building and practicing by the joint session against New Orleans. You get them in uniform for practices that are extremely valuable against another team. But B, there is a time, and nobody's exactly sure when it is, and it's probably different for each player, but there's a time before the season that player needs to actually be doing football activities with his team and playing with the team so that they're 100% ready when the season opener does actually arrive. Nobody's exactly sure when it is, and it could vary from player to player. We all understand that. But I would say that August 15th and 16th, the joint practices against the Saints, that's an important inflection point. Tomorrow is also an important inflection point in that stuff finally gets real tomorrow. The pads come on at 49ers training camp tomorrow. Pads weren't on over the first 4 sessions. That's all theatrics. That's warm up. It's guys getting out there, running around in shorts. There's not actual hitting going on. It's a good warm up and you need it, but it's not real football. Real football begins tomorrow. I don't think that there's much of a coincidence to the fact that Deebo Samuel signed his contract on this day 2 years ago, in between the non-padded warm-up and the padded portion of training camp. Deebo's a contact guy. He's a football player. And, there probably was a little bit of pressure to get back into training camp when the pads came on. Guys, I think, relish this day coming up tomorrow. It's not easy to put on the pads and start bruising out there, but it's part of what's necessary to build the callus for the regular season. So lost time starts accruing in earnest starting tomorrow if guys aren't there. If Brandon Aiyuk is there but not practicing and Trent Williams is still away, they're missing padded practices at this point. Trent's been around the league forever. He's 36 years old. Does he need a full training camp of padded practices? I don't think so. But does he need at least a couple weeks? Probably. Nick Bosa did. Nick Bosa wasn't able to go cold turkey to 100% last year. So I look at August 15th and 16th, those joint practices against the Saints being an important inflection point. You also look at the season opener date. That's the day that is, to me, a very, very hard deadline, definitely for somebody like Trent Williams. 49ers might be able to withstand no Brandon Aiyuk further into the regular season. Now, will Aiyuk be willing to withstand no paychecks? Because he's set to make the most money that he's ever made in his NFL career, $14.1 million this year. So the paychecks of around $800,000 are quite large for Brandon Aiyuk. I think that, ultimately financial security is going to be at the top of the priority list for him. And that's why the 49ers expect him to meet their offer. And they obviously want to keep that offer at a spot where it fits within their larger salary cap position. This is just negotiating one-on-one. But with Trent Williams, there's a little bit more leverage, or a lot more leverage, because you could still see the 49ers fielding a really damn good offense even without Brandon Aiyuk. He's very important as far as getting that last extra bit to win a Super Bowl, of course. So there's value in that. And obviously there's long-term value in being able to make sure that Aiyuk stays on the football team for more than just this 2024 season. But in the case of Trent Williams, it's almost life or death for the 49ers. We've seen Jalen Moore work in a practice. We've seen other tackles try to do what Trent Williams does, and they can't. He's the best in the game. The 49ers offensive line struggled outside of him last year. And, even though Brock Purdy was able to deliver that excellent efficiency with a substandard offensive line, you have to believe that Trent Williams' presence to at least mitigate some of those other O-line issues set a lot of the table for the 49ers. To me, you could compare Trent Williams' importance on this football team to Nick Bosa's presence. And the 49ers caved when Nick Bosa held out until that final week, right before the preseason opener, or the season opener against Pittsburgh last season. I think that Trent Williams might have the same type of pull. He might even have a little bit more leverage in that he's 36 and he can credibly threaten to retire if his demands aren't met. I don't know if Trent's doing that. I don't know if Trent's planning to do that, but I'm just looking at the business dynamics. Nick Bosa didn't have a credible retirement threat in his back pocket last year. Nick Bosa was still on his rookie contract looking for his first deal. Trent Williams has had a couple big deals in the NFL already. Re-signed with Washington, and he signed with the 49ers for what was at the time a record contract. And there's still 3 years left on that record contract for Trent Williams. So does he, people are saying, well, why doesn't he play out his contract? Shouldn't he do that? Leverage is leverage. And I said this the other day. It's like Darth Vader in Empire Strikes Back, who walks up to Lando. He says, I'm altering the deal. Pray that I do not alter it any further. Trent Williams has that kind of power. He can alter the deal, and the 49ers can just hope that he doesn't alter it any further. He wants more guaranteed money right now, and if the 49ers say no, well, Trent can just say, fine, I won't play. If he says that, then the 49ers are in trouble because they're in a win now year trying to win a Super Bowl. Theoretically, same thing could happen with Brandon Aiyuk. He could say, fine, I won't play, but it doesn't hurt the 49ers nearly as much because his position, given all the other star power that they have, isn't as important as Trent Williams' position. And also, there's less teeth behind that threat with Brandon Aiyuk because he's still on his rookie contract. He hasn't made the amount of money in his career that Trent Williams has made. He still needs to establish himself in this league. Trent Williams, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer if he quits today. So he's in a much stronger position. He's got the high ground if we're going to go for another Star Wars reference in this whole contractual saga. Anyway, I will stand with this, though. I think August 15th and 16th, I think those are really key dates for the 49ers and Trent Williams and Brandon Aiyuk, and they're still a little while away. We might still see a couple weeks without either of those two guys on the field. I know it's going to make fans a little antsy, but I don't really know what to tell you beyond that. You have to be patient in these NFL contractual situations. Look, the 49ers are not incentivized to budge off of their price, with Brandon Aiyuk especially right now. At some point, they're going to be incentivized to budge off of their price with Trent Williams. I think they're in a much better place to just hold firm with Brandon Aiyuk for all the reasons I listed. They've got more leverage. With Williams, that they might have to cave at some point. If he plays this as steadily as Nick Bosa and doesn't fold, doesn't blink, it's a stare down, right? I think Brandon Aiyuk has already blinked. He's already come to the table. He's already showed up at a training camp. The hold in is a statement in and of itself. But if Trent Williams doesn't blink, you might have to adjust your dollar figures if you're the 49ers. That's just the tough reality of the situation. Now, you hope that Trent also comes to play ball with you and he realizes that, the organization wants to not only win a Super Bowl this year, but the organization wants to stay good for the next couple of years. And those could all be within the umbrella of Trent Williams' contract. He's still playing as the top tackle in football. So even though he's 36, he could play until he's 39, 40 years old. We see it with offensive tackles. If there's a player who's physically capable of doing that, it's going to be Trent Williams. So it's in his interest, too, to not completely break the bank with the 49ers. He wants to keep that contract, you would think, under the flow control umbrella of being able to maintain the team. That's why I talk about the win-win, right? I mean, with the Christian McCaffrey contract, and I have this up here. It was on this article in The Athletic. How the 49ers paid Christian McCaffrey and still have room for Brandon Aiyuk and the Brock Purdy deals. We can actually go to the structure of the Christian McCaffrey deal. This is how the 49ers have been executing contracts. And this is something that they could do with Trent Williams, obviously at a different price point because left tackles make more than the running backs, but they can actually get more cap flexibility by giving him more guaranteed money and giving him a raise. They did it on a smaller scale with Christian McCaffrey. I think they could do it on a larger scale with Trent Williams, make him happy and also give the team more flexibility. The key, though, and what's tricky is finding the exact numbers and dealing with the structure in a delicate situation where Trent Williams is 36 years old. And the truth is that he can retire at any point. So if you're the team, you want some assurances. And if you don't get any assurances from Trent Williams, well, and you've got to make sure that you can structure the deal in a way that's favorable to you. But in general, you do have the ability to make guaranteed money more fungible and more flexible down the line. And I think that's ultimately how the 49ers will reach a deal with Trent Williams. They just have to find numbers that work for both sides. And right now, Trent Williams, you like it or not, he's incentivized to hold out for greater numbers because he does have so much leverage on his side. All right, let's open this up to a 49ers Q&A on this beautiful Sunday. It was nice to get the day off. I was all over San Francisco. It was cool to do a little show from South Park today. Not to be confused with the TV show South Park, but South Park, San Francisco. That's where I ate my sandwich from Deli Board. It was delicious. I probably will not share food in this episode. I was going to do another episode out from San Francisco today, but I had my bike with me. I just wanted to get home, and it got a little windy, although the new mic is giving us some real technical capabilities even when it's windy. It was windy today in South Park when I did that video. And watch it. I don't think you could tell it's windy where I'm eating the sandwich. It's because that, you clip the mic right here and it just kind of shields the wind. I think your shoulders and your body shield a lot of the wind as opposed to you're holding the camera out in front of you. That's right in the, it's right in the way of the wind. So that wind is going to hit, and iPhone microphones are pretty wind sensitive. It's not good. So I think that we've made an improvement that's going to help the show whenever we're out in the street in San Francisco or on stadium tours or in the tunnel at the stadium. There's a whole lot of possibilities. I am ready for your questions. I hope they bring me a whole lot of possibilities as well. Christopher Banks wants to know how Mordecai looks. It's really hard to tell because Mordecai's not getting any team drill reps right now. 49ers are busy running a QB2 battle. So they're giving the first team reps to Brock Purdy, and then the second and third team reps are being split between Josh Dobbs, who looked a whole heck of a lot better on Saturday, went 10 of 11, and Brandon Allen, who did not look as good on Saturday. I thought Brandon Allen was clearly the worst of the three quarterbacks on Saturday. That's going to take a little while, a couple more weeks that I think they need to determine who's the leader in that QB2 room. Josh Dobbs still getting his feet wet, getting acclimated in the 49ers building with the 49ers playbook. So Tanner Mordecai is going to have to be showing what he has in the film room, behind the scenes, cerebral command of the game. Maybe he starts to get some reps a little bit later in training camp once QB2 settles down. Maybe preseason, the game against the Tennessee Titans, Tanner Mordecai will get some time, especially late in that game. And he's going to have to take advantage of those limited opportunities. Brock Purdy did that his rookie year, and that's the way that you punch your ticket as a low draft pick or an undrafted free agent quarterback onto an NFL team. Joseph says during the 3-game losing streak, the defense cost the 49ers the game, not Trent being out. Well, I think it's a little bit of everything, right? I think you can't, there's no one size fits all answer. But if we look at that, they lost to Cleveland, they lost to Minnesota, they lost to Cincinnati. Cleveland offense stalled out for a lot of the game. Now, they were playing one of the best defenses in football at the time. It was a historically good Browns defense. So you got to give Cleveland some credit. We can't just sit there and pretend that they were playing. Who was a bad defense last year? The Cowboys. Cowboys were great against terrible teams and horrible defensively against good teams. No, like Seattle, somebody like that wasn't a good defense. So can't pretend like this was a mediocre defense they're playing. Cleveland had a really good defense. That being said, Deebo Samuel got hurt early, and I think a lot of the game plan was routed through Deebo Samuel. That's a big challenge. Christian McCaffrey got hurt in the second half of the game. By the end of that game, they didn't have Deebo or Christian McCaffrey on top of Trent Williams. And of course, losing Trent Williams hurts because he also got hurt in that game. It was also wet and also rainy and windy in Cleveland. Despite all of that, we should note that Brock Purdy led what should have been the game-winning drive without those weapons, without Trent Williams, in wet conditions against the great defense. He led a drive, just like Brady would have led a drive for the Patriots, or Montana would have led a drive for the 49ers, and he put the 49ers in the position to win the game. But Jake Moody missed the kick. All right. It didn't end up hurting the 49ers, but it's all worth noting. Next game was against the Minnesota Vikings. 49ers offense struggled at times in that game, but I thought Brock Purdy was really damn good. Really good against the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, until he got concussed, he was running around. He was making plays downfield off schedule. It was the concussion that stymied the offense at the very end of the game. And before that, it was the defense that was giving up a lot of big runs and a lot of big plays. I should also say that in the game against Cleveland, the 49ers couldn't stop the run, and it allowed the Browns to really control the clock and the pace of the game. And that was a Browns team with a backup quarterback. Who started? Was it PJ Williams that was starting for the Browns? Yeah. So it wasn't a good performance in the 49ers defense against Cleveland, especially against the run. Then the Minnesota game, Kirk Cousins lit him up. So definitely the defense had a lot of fault in that game, even though Brock Purdy played well, despite the fact that Trent Williams wasn't playing. Cincinnati, the defense was toast. They were tired. They needed the bye week. Joe Burrow was healthy. It was one of 2 games that Joe Burrow was healthy for. That version of that Bengals team could have won the Super Bowl last year. Unfortunately for them, Burrow got hurt, and they were only healthy for a little tiny snippet of the season. They just absolutely demolished the Bills, and they had their way with the 49ers. Purdy played well in that game, in the Cincinnati game, but he was fighting an impossible uphill battle because the defense was letting up way too much when they're fatigued with the 49ers. Would Trent Williams in there have helped? Of course, but I think the 49ers were just hopelessly overmatched on the defensive side of the ball. Cincinnati was going to put up 30 plus. It would have taken 30 plus. Matching them with no Deebo Samuel, no Trent Williams is going to be tough. As you can tell, it just took me 5 minutes to discuss what went wrong in those 3 games. It's not black and white. It's not like, okay, defense cost them this, offense cost them here. Trent Williams' absence hurt them in this one. It was a combination of everything in all these games. I think the defense was a huge culprit, the biggest culprit probably in Minnesota, combined with Brock Purdy's concussion. And I think that the defense was a really big culprit, but they were tired against Cincinnati. So there you have it. The point of football is it's a collective sport. You need as much of the talent as possible, but you also realize it's a violent sport. So you realize you're probably not going to have all the talent available for every single game. And because of that, building depth is really, really important. As Ian says, Burrow and Cousins carved the defense. Yeah, that was to me the beginning of the end of the Steve Wilkes era, right? Because after the Cincinnati game was the bye week, and that's when Kyle Shanahan said, "Hey, you need to move down from the booth to the field." And that was, it might have been symbolic, but, I think it was symbolic of the fact that Kyle Shanahan grabbed some control of the 49ers defense and said, we're experimenting too much. We're straying too much from our identity. Go back to the identity. Let's stop the run. Let's have some fun. You can mess around with some of the coverages, but please, let's make sure that this pass rush is operating at full tilt. And Shanahan made that change over the bye week after the Cincinnati loss. And then the defense came out firing against Jacksonville after the bye week. So and that's just the honest timeline of the season. The media just gets it wrong so often, right? And it's crazy that people thought that this was some kind of fluctuation in Brock Purdy's play that was driving the 49ers season. Purdy only dropped to number 2 or number 3 at the lowest in QBR during that losing streak. So Purdy was number 1 to number 3 in QBR all season. It's not like the 49ers won 5 games, then Purdy's play dropped off so low that he was one of the worst quarterbacks in the league, and that's why the 49ers were losing. Purdy was essentially elite throughout. Yeah, he got concussed against Minnesota, and I think that hurt him a little bit against Minnesota, but he was really damn good throughout most of the game against Cincinnati. He just had a defense that couldn't stop a nosebleed for a couple weeks there. He was awesome against Cleveland, I thought, despite the wet weather. The way that he was able to work through all of the variables going against him in Cleveland that I just listed, I thought that was extremely impressive. So Purdy was not the issue for the 49ers. This right here, what Ian puts on the screen, Burrow and Cousins carving the defense, was the issue for the 49ers in those weeks ahead of the bye. Yeah, I mean, nobody's saying that Purdy played perfect games. He did have an interception in the red zone against the Bengals, but you do understand that when a defense is getting carved up and there is immense pressure on the offense to drop back on every single down and score 40 points to win, the quarterback is much more likely to throw an interception. So, despite that, despite the fact that the defense wasn't making any stops or not enough stops, Purdy still, and there was a lot of pressure coming in on him without Trent Williams, he still made some backyard plays that cut the lead to one score later on in the game. So you get some and you lose some, with this kind of logic. It goes both ways. My main point is to zoom out and look at this as a team effort. And in a team sport, you can never expect any individual component of the team effort to be perfect because it's a chaotic sport. The other team gets paid too. So you want each individual component to give a performance that's good enough, and then you play complementary football. The defense helps the offense. Special teams helps both of them. Special teams didn't help anybody with the missed field goals in Cleveland. The defense wasn't helping anybody with the cover 0 call from Steve Wilkes and Kirk Cousins lighting the defense on fire in Minnesota. And the defense wasn't helping Brock Purdy out at all in that game against Cincinnati when they were really tired. Did Purdy play a perfect game? Absolutely not. But his QBR would have dropped down beneath number 3 if he was playing at a bad, alarming level, if he was making, the amount of turnovers, the amount of giveaways that were his fault, that were actually the cause of the 49ers losing. And what Purdy was doing definitely was not the lead cause of the 49ers losing. I think it's really fair to say when you look at it from an analytical point of view that it was the defense that was actually the main culprit in that regard. Exactly, Mike. When forced to be highly aggressive, the interception percentage increases. I have actually some cool data for you guys. We're going to go to the 2023 49ers on Pro Football Reference. This helps quantify what I'm talking about. We just have to go game by game. Okay, cool. So here it is. So this is the schedule. right? You see every single game. We could highlight the losing streak right here with these three. If you scroll over to the right, you see this column. It says expected points for the offense, defense, and special teams per game. So EPA per that game. You could see how many points a team added or lost in each phase of the game with the advanced metrics. So in Cleveland, the 49ers were negative 6.05 on offense. The offense, it was in the negatives. The offense was bad in Cleveland. We talked about that, right? They were missing McCaffrey. They're missing Samuel. They're missing Trent Williams. It was their worst offensive performance of the season, -6. Even the Baltimore game was better. The Baltimore game was -4. The defense was +11. So I wouldn't put as much of the blame in Cleveland on the defense, but look at the special teams. It was a game they lost by 2 points. The 49ers special teams lost them -7.3 expected points. So that game, the Cleveland game, based on the numbers, you can blame on the special teams, especially since Purdy got the 49ers in position for Moody to kick the game-winning field goal, but he missed it. All right, so we move on to Minnesota. Look in Minnesota. The offense is positive 5.43. So the offense is actually a plus against Minnesota. Look where the defense is, negative 16.3. The special teams also good, +6. Remember, Moody made a big long kick. I think it was a 54-yarder. That's when he got his season turnaround. Shanahan trusted him in that game. So unquestionably, and I'll highlight it here so you can see it. I guess the highlight doesn't. Oh, yeah. Well, here, you could see where my cursor is. Unquestionably, this was the defense at fault in Minnesota. Then you go on to week 8, Cincinnati. Look, the offense is plus 9.25. That's a good score for the offense. The defense is, again, horrific, negative 18.3. The defense is costing the 49ers 3 possessions worth of points in this game against the Cincinnati Bengals. So the blame in Minnesota and Cincinnati should be primarily shouldered by the defense, which is why Steve Wilkes got yanked out of the booth and taken down onto the field. Kyle Shanahan had to make a change because the defense was playing so poorly. The change worked, and the rest helped because the 49ers show up in Jacksonville, and the defense puts up plus 18. They go from -18 to plus 18. That's a 36-point difference. That's massive. The defense was night and day between pre-bye and post-bye, Cincinnati and Jacksonville. The offense goes plus 15 against Jacksonville. So the 49ers blew out Jacksonville. These are the kind of numbers that you see in a blowout. Then the offense is plus throughout the rest of the season, except for Baltimore. And then you see plus 33 against the Philadelphia Eagles. A lot of people might be wondering what the Super Bowl was. Well, check this out. Who do you blame in the Super Bowl? The advanced stats tell us that the offense was plus 4.7 and the defense was negative 3.4. So the defense was a little bit more of an issue. Now, special teams was an issue too, negative 3.4. Offense wasn't great in the Super Bowl, but the negative contributors were the defense and the special teams. Just an interesting food for thought looking at some of the expected points numbers game after game. Mike always has great points. I'm going to put Mike up on the screen more often. Gold was a great kicker, but his age and ability were diminishing. The 49ers needed to move on with a cost-effective young kicker. They had to do it at some point. And listen, they did it in the post. They did it last season, and they had to rely on Jake Moody in the postseason. That also is a double-edged sword because a lot of people are saying, well, Golden never missed in the postseason. Well, at some point he was going to miss in the postseason. If he wasn't going to miss in the postseason, he would still be kicking now. He wouldn't have retired. He would have said, I'm going to keep on kicking, even at a lower price somewhere. I'm going to prove to people that I'll never miss in the postseason. I think it was clear that Robbie Gould was losing a little bit of juice on his leg. Moody made some massive kicks for the 49ers in the postseason, including 2 in the Super Bowl of over 50 yards. I get it. He also missed the short kick, which was the extra point. That one got blocked. So you could argue, okay, Robbie Gould wouldn't have gotten blocked on the extra point, but would he have made both of the 50-plus yarders at the age of 40 with some of the diminishing leg strength that we had already seen? That question will never be firmly answered, but if you're the 49ers, you have to play it analytically. They did, and I think they got both ends of the double-edged Moody sword. I think probably you would say analytically it all evened out, and you've just got to be a little bit better on defense if you're the 49ers in 2024. You got to be a little bit better at right guard. Spencer Burford can't blow that block against Chris Jones. But analytically, looking at the big picture, 49ers were number 1 offensively last season, and they're about number 10 defensively. It was the defense that in the big picture was not good enough. The offense had to bail the defense out in the NFC Championship game. They successfully did. They overcame the deficit, but they had to fire Steve Wilkes. They had to return to basics. They brought Brandon Staley in. They hope that he helps schematically, and they hope in general that that defense is a top 5 unit again in 2024, and the offense obviously stays in the top 3. Joseph says the Young trade wasn't a failure, so to speak. It was an experiment. It didn't work out long term. I think they had to do something. They were weak at the edge rusher position last year opposite Nick Bosa. They traded for Chase Young. They got a little bit of juice from Chase Young, but nothing world changing, right? It was just one of those things where I think early on he was better against the run. Then later on, he might have worn down a little bit toward the end of the season. They got a little bit of pressure out of him at some key spots. It helped them there. Ultimately, he was not a game-changing player for the 49ers. I think they had to take a swing on somebody ahead of that trade deadline because that was one of the weaknesses of the team. The defense, again, was they slipped to the number 10 defense, number 26 against the run. So they needed to find something that would give them a little bit of a boost. It might have done that for a short period of time. It unfortunately didn't sustain itself enough through the postseason. And if you're the 49ers, you move on. You decide not to pay Chase Young as much as the New Orleans Saints decided to pay Chase Young, and you go and sign a player that's proven to be much more durable than Chase Young and Leonard Floyd. You live and you learn if you're the 49ers. You just got to keep on moving forward. You can't sit there and be like, oh, well, this decision didn't work, so now we're going to give up. There's a quote from Bill Walsh that my friend Spencer Ford, congratulations to him and his Prague Black Panthers team for winning the Austrian League Championship today. But there's a quote from Bill Walsh that I do have to share with you. Because his team, Spencer's team, lost in the semifinals last year to the Vienna Vikings. And they blew a touchdown lead late in that loss. And it was a really hard loss because this is a team that had long been dominated by Vienna. It looked like they finally had them on the ropes. And then the Vienna Vikings came back and beat them on their own home field. It was in Prague last year. So Spencer is a 49ers fan coaching this team, came back this year and said, we've got to find a way to get over the hump. And he's read a lot of Bill Walsh philosophy growing up as a 49ers fan. And one of the lines that stuck with him, and one of the lines that he texted to me today after they overcame Vienna and won in the Austrian Bowl 39 to win the championship, was this from Bill Walsh. Conversely, when you or the organization fall short of the goal, the letdown can be so severe you're blinded to substantive information indicating that success may be closer than you would imagine. Think about that. So this is so perfect in this age of online freakouts, where every time that a team loses, people think that the world is on fire, that you got to blow everything up, that it won't work out. The truth of the matter is that the 49ers were about an inch away from winning the Super Bowl. If a ball does not accidentally hit Darrell Luter Jr.'s leg, 49ers almost certainly beat the Chiefs and win the Super Bowl. If Spencer Burford blocks Chris Jones, they almost certainly win the Super Bowl. If Brock Purdy's pass on third down is not knocked away on the possession prior to that, the 49ers probably win the Super Bowl. The 49ers are literally within an inch of winning the Super Bowl last year. It's agonizing. I get it. If you're with the 49ers, if you're a 49ers fan, but you can't think that you have to blow everything up just because you are an inch away. People around, like the media is going to blow everything out of proportion. The media is going to try to find seismic faults within a team that was an inch away from winning the Super Bowl. But as Bill Walsh warned, The letdown can be so severe, you can be blinded to substantive information indicating that success may be closer than you would imagine. I think that's where the 49ers are right now. They're really damn close, and they're trying to push it that extra inch. Another thing is that the postseason is so tough because at the very least, even if you're like the 1 seed, right? If you had the bye, the very least, you have to sweep a 3-game series to win the Super Bowl. A 3-game series against good NFL competition. Maybe a bad team sneaks its way into the postseason every once in a while, like the Eagles last season, but the 49ers did not have the benefit of playing them. 49ers had to play 3 good teams. They had to play the Packers, they had to play the Detroit Lions, they had to play the Kansas City Chiefs. You have to sweep that 3-game series. If you lose one of those games, you're done. So in baseball, you have to win 3 series, yeah, but you could lose games on the way. So you have to win 3 7-game series. If you're the wild card, you've got to win a series before that. But you could lose up to 3 games in each 7-game series before you're eliminated. In football, it's a 3-game series that you have to sweep. There is no 7-game series, right? The 49ers won 2. They show up against the Chiefs. They don't get 7 tries to beat the Chiefs. They got that 1 try, and anything can happen in a 1-game situation. Anything did happen in that 1-game situation. So I shouldn't have to rehash how close the 49ers were to winning last year, but that's where they are this season, and that's the hump that they're trying to get over as they head into 2024. Let's put up some good questions. I'm reading a couple text messages. Mike says, post your questions. Nobody talks about the holding the Chiefs offensive line was doing the whole game. I think we've talked about it. I think we talked about the theories of what they call and what they don't. I know the 49ers aren't happy about it. I know Nick Bosa's not happy about it. I know there was a brutal holding call on Trent Williams that negated a great Brock Purdy throw to George Kittle early in the game. I mean, it is what it is. If you're the 49ers, you've got to assume if you play the Chiefs again that the game is going to be called similarly, and you have to build your margin of error to be greater than the holding that you think should be called, but probably won't be called. That's all I can tell you. You know, like I don't. 49ers tried to work the officials before the game. They talked about it in the media. You know, all of that happened, and this was 4 years after the 2019 season Super Bowl, where they obviously thought the Chiefs were holding. So you have to just build a big enough margin to overcome that. I don't see any other viable alternative for the 49ers beyond just sitting there and whining about it, right? So, and that's not a viable alternative. Whining is not going to get you to where you want to be. You just have to make it you have to make it a official proof margin. Let's put it that way. A holding proof margin, or a lack of holding call margin if you're the 49ers. And they almost did. But I think you could go back. The single play that hurt them the most in that Super Bowl was the punt that hit off of Luter's leg, and Ray McLeod couldn't recover. You have to make sure that special teams is not losing you points, because if it does, if it loses you too many points, and they lost a lot of expected points on special teams, that'll probably doom you in a game against Patrick Mahomes. When do I expect the Trent deal to be completed? I would say within the next week. Within the next week. That's my prediction. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I have no inside information right now. I don't think anybody does. I think that one's been held very close to the vest. Nobody. Well, I mean, I told you guys that it might be an issue with Trent Williams before the holdout actually happened, but I don't think that this was really leaked in a way to the media, in an official way to the media. So I don't know if there's information coming out of the 49ers building or from Trent Williams' side that would really allow us to get an exact tip as to when this might come. I still remember the Trent Williams contract when he signed it with the 49ers in 2021. Richard Sherman actually tipped me off. And it wasn't because Richard Sherman was getting inside information. It was midnight, and Trent Williams announced on Instagram that he was re-signing with the 49ers. And Sherman messaged me and said, hey, you might want to check out Trent's Instagram. So this wasn't leaked to the national reporters, Schefter, Rappaport, won't leak to anybody. Trent put it out on Instagram himself. So I think that based on that precedent, we can expect these negotiations to remain airtight, and news might come from Trent or the 49ers themselves. When Hufanga is healthy, how do you think the 49ers handle their three great safeties? Well, I wouldn't call Malik Mustafa a great safety yet. He's got a lot to prove. He's making good plays for the second team. I think he's an exciting prospect. I've been talking about him a lot. I get it. But listen, with any player evaluation, especially at the safety position where a small mistake is so exposed at the NFL level, a bad angle can turn into a long touchdown, snap of a finger. He's got to work his way into it. So I think that they're going to work Malik Mustafa in like they worked Talanoa Hufanga into the mix in 2021. Third DB, third safety. Toward the end of that 2021 season, we saw a lot of those formations to get Hufanga onto the field. That he cut his teeth through those three safety sets. So the 49ers would be in a luxurious position if they could do that with Malik Mustafa. Will Pearsall be ready for pad training? Yes. He might be back tomorrow. If he's not back tomorrow, then I'm sure he'll be back at some point this week. But the recovery going well for Ricky Pearsall. We'll keep our eye out for him at practice tomorrow. As Mike says, Mustafa's going to be a really good special teams player. As a ball of muscle running a 4.49, especially with the new kickoff return rules, where you're going to need some physicality in close quarters. I think that's a good prediction. Does Pearsall have to pay a fee for getting hurt outside of the Niners scope? No. I mean, the 49ers expect guys to work out over the course of the offseason when they're not at the facility. I mean, you got to do something when you're gone so you don't show up out of shape. You would face a fine if you got, like, remember when Jeff Kent got hurt? I think he broke his wrist on his motorcycle. He tried to act, the Giants player. This is baseball. This is 20 years ago. Then for a while he was talking about that he was trying to wash his truck and that's how he broke his wrist. But then video came out, or an eyewitness report came out, that he was actually riding his motorcycle in Arizona. That's the kind of stuff that'll get you fined in professional sports. You have clauses in these contracts that say you can't go skiing, can't ride a motorcycle, you can't do stuff that could get you hurt. And if you do get hurt in that kind of way, yes, you could get fined. But in the case of getting hurt actually working out for football, you're not going to get fined for that, and you can't get fined for that. No, Tanner Mordecai has not taken a team drill snap yet, to answer your question. A lot of people asking about Mordecai, but I would be more curious about the backup quarterback situation. That's Dobbs. Mordecai, if he deserves reps in that backup situation, he'll get them. If he's showing enough in the meeting room with his processing, with some of the VR stuff that they're doing, he'll get them. But right now, that's Dobbs and Brandon Allen. All right, so tomorrow, big day. We're going to cut this at 49 minutes because it's a podcast and a show about the 49ers. Subscribe to the Lombardi Lounge on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. Make sure you do that. Make sure you hit the subscribe button here. We are about to hit a milestone, 74,000. 74K. It's a big deal. So hit that button right now. You could be the 74,000th subscriber if you hit that button right now, because I think we're just a few away. So do that and have a good night. That's a command. We'll see you tomorrow from 49ers training camp.